Welcome to With You Podcast, where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm Tara.
And I'm David.
And now for something completely different.
I love it.
We usually talk about big relationship topics like marriage, parenting, teenagers, and in-laws. But today we're going down to the micro level. We're going to get all sciencey today and talk about the relationship between ourselves and our environment, our own living ecosystem, the human microbiome.
So what do we mean by the human microbiome? Very little. I don't know. And so that's why we're excited to have our special guest today. We're going to talk with filmmaker Toni Harman. And she produced the documentary MICROBIRTH. She spent a lot of years talking with experts about microbiome, why it matters so much to our health and our well-being. And she is on a mission to share the cutting-edge research of this importance of birth practices, breastfeeding, early childhood parenting, all of it to optimize the individual and infant's microbiome.
Yeah, so I attended Toni's MicroBirth conference where she brings together a whole lot of experts, professors, researchers, perinatologists, a lot of really smart people that are talking about the latest information on our microbes and their impact on human health, which is kind of a hot topic these days with probiotics and all that stuff. So I really recommend her virtual conference and online courses to anyone who is fascinated about this topic.
Yeah, and just in case you're like me and are still trying to understand what microbiome actually is, I think of it as our kind of interior ecosystem. So I like to think about family systems theory. You all know that. And where there's mutually influencing relationships that kind of benefit and affect us back and forth. And that's what I think about when I think about microbiome. So here's a definition from the National Human Genome Research Institute. The microbiome is the community of microorganisms like fungi, bacteria, viruses, that exist in a particular environment. In humans, the term is often used to describe the microorganisms that live in and on us, like in our gastrointestinal tract, our skin. These groups of microorganisms are dynamic and change in response to a host of environmental factors such as exercise, diet, medication, and exposures. So that's the definition that I looked up. You're welcome.
Scientific definition.
Yes,
it does help.
I love lecturing a little bit.
So we really can't wait to dive in and hear what Toni's got to say. So we'll welcome her and get into microbial cells, bacteria, birth practices, and even epigenetics. Hi, Toni. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us all the way from the UK.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited, and I love talking about the microbiome. And so thank you for having me as a guest.
Yeah, and we know you have tons to say about it. We've already previewed your MicroBirth film. I brought David up to speed because in my doula work, I know all about the stuff you talk about, and it's very exciting to me. And David's learning about it connected to his ideas about family systems. But we'd like to start with you just introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, how you got into this microbiome stuff.
My name's Toni Harman, and originally I was a filmmaker. So I say originally because I've been making films and documentaries, and then I had a baby, and then everything shifted. So I started making films and documentaries about childbirth and breastfeeding. And then we discovered the world of the microbiome and the world of microbes and bacteria. And I've been surrounded by scientists who have been exploring the microbiome for the last 10 years. But actually, I've been immersed myself in bacteria for the last decade.
And you've done that with your partner, right? With Alex Wakeford, and you both have done the documentary and a new documentary.
So Alex is my partner, Alex, and we've been together since film school. So we've been together for the last 30 years, and we make films together. So we made our film MICROBIRTH together, and making a new film which out later this year together. And we've been exploring this world and going on adventures together. So it's just been a really nice kind of family adventure, really. When we go filming, we take our daughter with us, so it becomes this kind of a family mission to bring this science to the wider world.
We love that, Toni. So to get us started, can you help us understand what is the microbiome?
So when you talk about the microbiome, that tends to be the human microbiome. So they're the community of microbes that live on and in us that are really integral to our health. So they help with digestion, metabolism, the immune system. They help protect us against infections. There's a gut-brain connection. So what happens? So trillions, the biggest part of our microbes, our microbiome is in our gut, and there's a gut-brain connection. So what happens in your gut affects how your brain works. So it's seeing ourselves not as me, Toni. This is seeing myself as a human super organism. So it's me, Toni, plus the trillions of microbes that live on and in me. That is the real Toni. That's you guys.
Wow.
That's kind of all of us. So and we interact with microbes. So everything we eat or touch, microbes go in us. They're part of us, and it's kind of seeing ourselves as an ecosystem, as a walking, talking ecosystem, just as a new way of seeing ourselves.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I love how you said it's looking at it under the microscope, because it's just kind of telescoping down, and then we telescope out of how there's this wholeness. Like you say, here, I'm Toni and you see me, but there's all this smaller parts that interact, that the wholeness is all these interactions. And those interactions start from, in utero, in terms of stress of the mother and cortisol and those levels. But then we get to this microbial part that activates in birth. Or I need some help, because I watched it and I was taking notes, and I just need a little more help, because I think on the more macro level than the micro level. So this idea of we're made up all of these viruses and organisms and microbes. How does that get in us? How is that part of us? So it is part of us, but what's the process? I love process.
So it's really this is really, really complex science, but I'm going to explain it really, really simply. Okay.
Thank you, because I am simple.
No, you're super smart, but I'm going to try and take this incredibly complex science, and we've interviewed some of the most brilliant scientists who have these amazing, huge brains. But I'm going to take what their knowledge. So everybody's microbiome is unique. Okay, so my trillions of microbes that live on and in me, they're different to what the trillions of microbes that are around on you guys, on and in you guys. Okay, so during pregnancy, my microbiome changes. If I was pregnant, my microbiome would be changes. So there are changes in your gut and in your vagina, if you're lucky enough to be a woman. And
oh, good. I was like, I think that's a problem for me.
But the male microbiome comes into it, but I'll come back to that later. Okay. So just talking about the female microbiome. So during pregnancy, the mother's microbiome changes in preparation for birth and breastfeeding. So the baby develops in a near sterile environment inside the womb. There may or may not be some exposures in the womb, and that's what scientists are debating at the moment. So there might be small exposures, but that's a kind of a hot topic of debate. But so there may be small exposures while in the womb. But the magic happens really when the amniotic membranes rupture. So that happens before or during birth, right? So the water's breaking. So the water's breaking, and as the baby comes through the birth canal, the baby is starting to pick up all these microbes from the mother's vagina. And then as the baby comes out, hopefully the baby will get a good lick of mum's bum, and that's brilliant because that's exposure to the mum's gut microbes. And then the baby is hopefully placed directly skin to skin on mum's chest, and that's the mum transferring the beneficial microbes from her skin to her baby. So all these beneficial microbes from her vagina, from her gut, from her skin are transferred to this baby. And the baby kind of sucks them all up. And you've seen babies, they suck and they lick and everything. And that's them taking in microbes which they swallow. And those first microbes that reach the baby's gut, they start colonizing the infant gut. And they're the kind of pioneer microbes, are the most important ones. And they're hungry. They come out really, really hungry. So they need to be fed. And this is the magic part, is that there are the third largest component of breast milk are these HMO sugars, these special sugars. And they are food, not for the baby itself, but for the microbes, for the beneficial microbes transferred from the mum during the birth process. So those special HMO sugars, human milk oligosaccharides, they feed those hungry microbes in the baby's gut. And that means that those microbes colonize the infant gut quickly. And if hopefully the baby's gut will be colonized with the mum's beneficial microbes, because that crowds out any pathogens, and that having the right microbes there at the right time in the right order, this trains, for want of a better word, educates the infant immune system. And if the infant immune system is educated by the right microbes arriving at the right time, fed by those special sugars in the breast milk, that will protect the baby for the rest of its life. So the baby's immune system will be able to identify what's friend to be tolerated, what's foe to be attacked. Oh. So it's this amazing process.
Yeah.
So it starts during pregnancy. Well, it starts before conception even, because you've got the mum's microbiome needs to be in a kind of a good way, kind of a balanced microbiome ideally, because that's her microbiome is going to be transferred to her baby during birth. And so I said about the male microbiome. There's evidence about the kind of there's microbes in the sperm, and that might play a part in this whole process. So it's amazing. It's just like this whole system is all connected.
It's so complex.
It's really complex, but there's connections with not just the immune system. There's brain development. So having the right microbes at the right time, fed by those HMO sugars, that there's a link with how the baby's brain develops, and so you've got this kind of multi complex layered system all happening in this fragile process, this sensitive time period during birth and breastfeeding.
So it's fascinating to me. I have to let it kind of wash over me, kind of like maybe all the microbiome in the birth process because I think most of Western medicine sees, and I know Tara's a doula, so she comes home and I'm like, you need to get all that fluid off of you. There's a kind of a response about sterilizing and messiness of, we need to move away from the messiness because the dirty aspect of it is bad for us. It makes us sick. And as you're talking, I'm thinking it's the exact opposite. There's these bodily fluids that are really, really helpful in terms of our long-term health, our development. And it just kind of blows my mind a little bit, because there's been just a lot of messaging about, well, you need to be clean, you need to, oh, that's messy, that's dirty. And what you're saying is, no, a good handful of dirt is helpful for our immune system and our development. And specifically the mom's body, the dad's body, we need to be more mindful of connected to each other, connected to our own biology with each other, that there's a function for it all, rather than this messiness to put aside.
Well, exactly that, right? So if you think about our evolution, we've evolved in these small family groups, and the right microbes for your baby's immune system. You want the baby's immune system to be able to tolerate the microbes in the home environment. So the mum, the dad, any siblings, having a dog is really helpful too. So they're the microbes in that family unit, which are really, really helpful for the baby's immune system, because you want to be able to say that everything in the family unit, and the people in the family unit, they're the microbes which the baby's immune system wants to be able to tolerate, needs to kind of learn what they are. So I'm not saying all dirt is good, but it's just not being so sterile.
Yeah.
So and it's having a sensible approach to sterilizing your home. I mean, there are pathogens out there, and you want to kind of avoid pathogens. I'm not saying have a raw chicken and fling that around your kitchen, but I'm saying just being a bit mindful.
Yes, but it does bring in the question then about what's our part in this, because a lot of it just happens automatically. It just happens what we're exposed to. And so I think you learned in that process of the birth of your baby about how that was important. Can you tell us more about what part can we play in enhancing the baby's microbiome? Because a lot of it's going to happen no matter what we do, but there's things we can do, right, to make it an optimal process.
See, with my birth, I had as a filmmaker, I thought I was super prepared. So I took two different antenatal classes. I took a separate breastfeeding class, and in my birth plan, I just wanted a home birth and to exclusively breastfeed. That's the only thing I wanted. In the event, I ended up with an emergency C-section. I struggled to breastfeed. My baby was presented to me wrapped up in a tight towel, kind of 40 minutes after surgery. I had antibiotics. The baby had antibiotics. Within an hour of my baby being born, a nurse came in with a cup of formula and said, your baby's got to feed. Here's a cup of formula. So the three things that research has shown damages the microbiome are C-section, not damages, that's the wrong word, but changes the microbiome and can deeply affect the microbiome. All the microscopic processes I described with kind of vaginal birth and skin and breastfeeding. If you have C-section, antibiotics or formula feeding, these all cause perturbations, so changes in the baby's microbiome, and that can offset the immune training, can interfere with optimal immune training, and this is linked to all different conditions, like everything from allergies, asthma, obesity, diabetes. These are all linked to changes in the early life microbiome. Okay, so what can you do? So sometimes C-section is necessary, sometimes antibiotics are necessary. I'm not against them. Sometimes formula is necessary. Ideally, if the baby's microbiome is affected by one of those three things, then the best thing is exclusive breastfeeding, is to get, if possible, to get support for breastfeeding. So that might be, the mum might not be able to breastfeed, but she might be able to express colostrum. So, Tara, all about expressing colostrum. Yes. So, and it could just be a, tiny amount of colostrum, but any amount of colostrum the baby can have is beneficial, massively beneficial. So it might be hand expressed, or it might be using machines or pumps. Ideally, you'd want to skin to skin and for the mum to biologically breastfeed. But if that isn't possible, donor milk, there might be an option for donor milk. There might be options if the mum isn't available, then the dad is available for skin to skin. So getting the dad's microbes from his skin to the baby. It's, the number one thing is exclusive breastfeeding, but skin to skin helps. And if it's the family unit, I'm not suggesting you put the newborn on a dog, but it is this guy, siblings, family members. And what you don't want is your baby passed around to different people who are outside that family unit. And ideally, you don't want the microbes from a hospital to be those early life microbial exposures. You ideally, in an ideal world, just thinking about the microbiome, it would be a home birth and exclusive breastfeeding. But if that's not possible, and it's a choice to give birth in hospital, then you could bring in some things from home, which might have your home environment microbes on.
So you're saying the microbes, even just from your home environment, make a difference for the baby?
They make a difference, but not to the same extent as exclusive breastfeeding. Exclusive breastfeeding is like number one, access to the mum's own breast milk is like by far the number one way to restore a baby's microbiome.
And it's not just the breast milk itself too, but the skin, the microbes on the skin that the baby's exposed to as they're feeding.
Exactly. So it's the breast milk, because there's those special sugars which are in breast milk, those HMO sugars. They're the ones which feed the beneficial microbes, and there's a kind of a match between the beneficial microbes mum passes to the baby during the birth process, and the HMO sugars within her breast milk. So everybody's got different HMO sugars in breast milk, and they're personalized to the baby. So it's not just breastfeeding, but skin to skin as well, and just being sensible with your exposures, and when necessary, antibiotics are fantastic, but it's kind of when necessary, really.
Yeah. So
the same with
what is the effect that the antibiotics have? Do they make damage to the microbiome itself in the gut, or what happens to those? Do they need to replenish? Can they be replenished if there's been early exposure? What happens there?
Okay, so if you think about antibiotics, what they are designed to kill or destroy microbes. So you have broad spectrum antibiotics, and you have narrow spectrum antibiotics. So broad spectrum antibiotics just kind of wipe them out, 95%, 97%, 99%, depending what the antibiotic is. So that means that they kill all those microbes. So when it's 99% microbial killing, that's it. So 99%. And the ones which are left are the ones which are resistant to antibiotics. And they're not the ones you want, really. The kind of the bacteria that's resistant to these antibiotics. And so that's really, they can be really helpful to prevent an infection. And I'm not, doctors have a really hard job, and they do a brilliant job at keeping the human alive and keeping kind of the human's survival. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. However, so it's just being mindful of the microbiome, this whole different invisible world that is also happening during that same process. So the way to restore after antibiotic exposure comes back to exclusive breastfeeding again. It won't completely restore the microbiome, but it will go a long way to restoring the microbiome. So if you take antibiotics and they kill off most of the bacteria, that's most of that bacteria. Most of that bacteria can be restored, but there are some that are lost from those antibiotics. That might be a problem, those ones being lost. It might be a problem. That's kind of where people are researching right now. Which ones do we need? Which ones don't we need?
So the picture in my head as you're talking is thinking about us living in our environment. Like trees produce oxygen, and we need the trees for oxygen production for the survival of the human. The microbiome is similar, just on the microscopic level. And so I know when we clear a bunch of trees, it's helpful to plant trees. So thinking about breastfeeding, but maybe later in life, let's say I was bottle fed and was a can't say the word.
You can say C-section.
C-section baby. My trajectory is a certain way. The environment's set up a certain way. Is there things I can do now? I know the whole probiotic market, I'm thinking along that lines, but I'm curious of what can affect the trajectory for, school age kids and teenagers and 55-year-olds.
So there are certain sort of windows of so the baby's immune system is thought to be set by about 6 months, that kind of immune training happens. And you have one chance for immune training, and if you miss that window for the first 6 months, it's very, very difficult to affect your immune, to try to recorrect your immune training, your immune system. So once it's set, from your microbiome settles about age 2 to 3, depending how long you breastfeed for, or when weaning happens. But yeah, generally it's thought to set between ages 2 to 3. And once it's set, your microbiome is pretty much stable for most of your adult life. So there's a little bit of a wobble during puberty, and it starts to change again, kind of in your 60s, 70s, kind of the elderly microbiome. Is when another time of when a rapid change. So what can you do? So you could eat. So your diet and your lifestyle has a big effect on your microbiome. So I'll come to probiotics in a minute. So diet is eating like diverse range of vegetables and fruit, lots of whole grains. You want lots of fiber. If your body can take fiber, and if you've got IBS or other gut issues, then take advice from a dietitian or nutritionist. But in general, so it's a diverse range of plant-based foods, but there's your body does need some meat products, so bone marrow products, and there might be vegan alternatives. I'm just saying, that's what the research is saying. There might be vegan and vegetarian alternatives, and then so fermented foods could be really, really helpful in terms of so fermented foods are probiotic type foods. They're live microorganisms, so that could be useful. And there's also things like meditation and rest and getting good sleep. These all affect the microbiome. Exercise affects your microbiome. Getting a dog, again, is really good, because that's kind of dogs are brilliant, because they go outside, they scramble in the earth, they come back in, they run around your house, and they spread all those microbes all around your house. Cats are less so of microbial superhighways, because cats tend to go outside, come in, go to sleep. They don't kind of run around your house. They don't lick your face necessarily. They're just not as good as, sharing the microbes. Having siblings is really good for your microbiome. So, and just getting into nature. So we're opening windows, house plants. So it's having a sensible approach to house cleaners. So rather than using antibacterial soaps, just use normal soap. It's just kind of those sorts of things. Going for walks, getting into the sea, into trees. So if walking in a forest after rain is really good. The microbiome. It might not restore your microbiome, but it's just really good in terms of your microbial exposures.
It's so interesting.
Okay, so
sorry. I just was thinking, as you're saying all this, we've been talking so much about how isolation is so bad for mental health, and everything you're saying is showing that isolation is also the worst thing we can do for our physical health.
It is, but say baby. So I was talking to a scientist the other day, and they were saying babies born over lockdown, over COVID, actually, because they had less exposures, so the mums basically stayed in their kind of family unit, and they had less visitors and that whole thing. Their early life microbiome is kind of much, for want of a better word, much better, because they didn't have kind of hospitals and everything else. And it was basically they came home, families came home and cocooned themselves indoors. So just within the kind of the first few, maybe the first month or 6 weeks, having less exposures is better, because you want the immune system to recognize the friendly bacteria. Your home environment is your friendly bacteria.
So it's a more curated, it's a curated microbiome.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So coming back to probiotics. So probiotics, everybody's microbiome is unique, right? So your microbiome is going to be different from mine. It's going to be different from both of you. Even though you share many of your microbes, you're still going to have different between you guys, right? So a probiotic might work for one of you, but it might not work for both of you. And in a few years, we'll have personalized probiotics which suit our own microbiome, and that's where we're headed, and that'll be fantastic. And probiotics, right now you can get so Alex, my partner, he takes a probiotics that's marketed for vaginas, and he doesn't have a vagina, but that probiotic is really good for cholesterol. So it's just this weird thing.
Oh.
So it's to reduce cholesterol, having the sort of vaginal probiotics. So at the moment, it's a little bit of a wild west in terms of marketing of probiotics. Some probiotics might be there's more evidence for some probiotics and less evidence for other probiotics, but the marketing of those other ones might dominate. So it's kind of doing your research, really, is finding out what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So not all, and the probiotics that tend to work. So if you take probiotics, they if you take them once, they'll just go through you. So after the age of 2 to 3, once your microbiome settles, then you've got to keep taking them daily, because your microbiome is pretty much set. So they don't kind of stick around in your gut.
Yeah.
So if you're going to take probiotics, it's a case of taking them and taking them and taking them, or growing them and fermenting your own foods, and that could be a way to get probiotics, natural probiotics from your foods.
So my one question is, having a pint, is that a probiotic? Thinking about the foods you were listing, I was hoping that kind of the yeast and things in a pint of beer might be helpful.
All right, so this is really interesting. So small quantities of say red wine is good for your microbiome. So small quantities of red wine, and there's a Belgian beer called, I think it's Lambic beer. And what they do, they have these huge, great big vats, and they have I think it's like a monastery in Belgium, and really high ceilings, and things fall into the vats.
Yeah, they're open. The tops are open. The tops are open, right? And so there's research which suggests that Lambic beer is really good for your microbiome, but it doesn't taste great. In my view. So yes, it could be if you're drinking this like particular Belgian beer, very specific
beer from these Belgian monasteries with the kind of open top vats. So small amounts of alcohol could be beneficial. I mean, it has small amounts of alcohol has benefits in terms of like relaxation, and that's so meditation and relaxation. That's all good for your microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
What isn't good for your microbiome is inflammation and stress, and kind of that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of moderation, really.
Yeah. I love the developmental milestones, being a developmentalist, of thinking about that first 6 months of life, then thinking about the 2 to 3 years. How are we informing pediatricians? How are we informing the medical community about not just helping the human, but helping the microbial parts of infants and young children?
That's a very, very good question. That's what we're trying to do. So we're starting to run these conferences. We've run 2 scientific conferences. We're about to do our third. And it's the idea that we're starting to make inroads with different professions. So midwives, nurses, childbirth educators, doulas. Yes, great. And we're starting to get inroads with obstetricians and pediatricians. So and other health professionals. But it's going to take a while, because research can take up to 17 years from the moment research gets published before it gets adopted into clinical practice. So we've been beating the drum, and we've been telling everybody, we've been coming on podcasts and sharing awareness, but it does take a while and to infiltrate into the medical community,
to actual practice.
and it's just that's the way the system is set up. So medical systems at the moment are focused on keeping alive the human, and it's trying to change that to see us as human super organisms.
Right. And I think people get focused on what is the change in practice? What does that mean? It seems like a small thing when you look at it, but we always like to look at the bigger picture. And I don't know if we have long-term research on it yet. I think it's probably in the works, but we know something about the long-term consequences for our health, right? When our microbiome isn't in balance, or if, it's been disturbed, it's not just I'm going to have, gut problems right now. It's kind of a long-term consequence issue for our health, and maybe even the health of the next generation.
That's the thing. So Professor Rodney Dieter, who was in our MICROBIRTH film, was in our conferences. So has written a couple of papers, and he's written 100-page papers, but he's kind of projected this tree of disease. So if you start with let's take two non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable means that you have a disease that's not infectious. You can't catch a non-communicable disease. So he looked at asthma. So the health trajectory of someone with asthma as they grow up and age. So with asthma, I think it's 36 comorbidities are associated with having asthma in early life. With obesity, I think it's 43 comorbidities. That means there's a higher risk of you having 43 other conditions just because you have obesity at an early age. So there's this whole tree of disease that we're looking at related to this early life microbiome with these ramifications. And there is an epigenetic thing. So epigenetics is you're born with a set of genes, and some genes are think of it as sliders on a sliding scale. So some genes are slid on, some genes are slid off. So they're the same genes, but just some are activated, some are not activated, or expressed or not expressed. And there's a link between the microbiome and your genes as to which genes are expressed or when they're expressed. And this can be passed down through the generations. So we're just starting to scratch the surface about the implications of this and the long-term consequences. So things that happen now during birth and this sensitive period over kind of early infancy, that could have ramifications for the long-term life of somebody. So all this, this tree of disease that's ahead of them, but also that you have disturbances or a dysbiotic gut, and that could be passed to the next generation. So and these epigenetic changes, they could also be passed to the next generation. So it's like you say, it's a systems thing.
Yeah.
So we're and it's these intricate, delicate systems that we're mucking up right now, and that could have consequences for multiple generations to come.
I think I read an article about this. It was kind of the equivalent of "you are what your grandfather ate," and it was up in the Nordic countries. I can't remember, Scandinavia, Sweden, somewhere there, where they had a lot of data that they collected, just anecdotal about the environment and feast and famine kind of resources that people would have, and then 2 generations later, the health risks or benefits based on feast or famine. What you were just saying was making me think of that kind of macro environmental issues are deeply connected with the microbiome, leading to the implications of not just our life well lived, but thinking about the generations down the line.
And it's it's a positive news story, right? It's a positive story. So there's a scary element in that we're mucking things up now, but
yeah,
there is a positive side to things, that if you're aware, and so our mission is to make more people aware of this, because then you can change the trajectory, and there are things you can do. So support for breastfeeding would be brilliant. I would love every single person to have one-to-one access to an IBCLC or a doula or postpartum, just someone who helps them establish breastfeeding. I'd want, and for that to be free and just a resource that people put into this kind of delicate time period. Sometimes you can't things happen during births and you can't predict those things. But if there's support for every single person to breastfeed, that could make a massive difference. Not just for this generation, but potentially for the generations to come. It's being aware about I mean, it's bandied about, oh, a healthy diet, you've got to eat a healthy diet, but understanding what that means in terms of making a plant-based diet with a diverse range of vegetables and fruit, getting into nature, to being at one with our microbes, and that, so be having a balanced microbiome. And we can all do things today. We can start to introduce fruits or veg into our diet and go for walks in the outdoors, open our windows, get some plants, get a dog. Or we don't have a dog. We borrow someone's dog.
Yes.
We borrow a dog because we want the kind of, and we take the dog for walks, and the dog comes back and sort of slothers us with licks and whatever. It's like, great, yes. So it is a positive news story, because you can, things you can do, and it's not about money, it's about just knowledge.
No, you're right. It sounds like a lot of it is really doable, because it's going back to just interacting with the natural way things work when we don't need intervention, when we, a natural birth, connection with your baby, connection with your family, connection with the natural world. The things that were already created around us are created for our health and our benefit. It's just understanding that that's important, long term and in the immediate time.
That's it. And just and being aware that there's going back to what I was saying at the very beginning, being aware that it isn't just Toni, it's me and my community of microbes. But what I really love is you walk into a room and you have a cloud of microbes all around you, and my cloud of microbes follows me into a room or into a car, and everywhere I go I leave some of my microbes behind. So if you go into an old church, say, for example, and you think about all the hundreds or thousands of people have been in that church, and their microbes are left in that environment, and it's just this kind of, it's like, wow, when you start to think about it. And scientists can track who've been in certain rooms by the microbes they've left, and it's like, yeah, let's just all think about ourselves not as ourselves, but as ecosystems that we can restore and which we can interact with. And it's a whole new way of seeing ourselves and our place on the planet.
That's encouraging, and because you can get in that deep spiral of like, oh, we're screwed because we didn't do that in the first bits of life. But there are trajectories that we can. I'm curious, looking forward, of what's your next documentary, and two, what's the kind of promising areas of research and development that's happening in the microbiome and human health?
So our next film will be later this year. I can't tell you the title, but it's all about this stuff. It's about why. It's kind of the follow-on from MICROBIRTH, in that MICROBIRTH looked at kind of the birth side of things, and the kind of particularly focused on C-section, and just kind of a slice of the importance of birth. This is seeing that and that early life microbiome and why it matters in terms of the planet. So it's connecting our existence as a species with what happens during the birth process and the birth and that kind of sensitive first 2-3 years of life. So and what the areas of research, I think what's really interesting about this is the personalized microbiome. This idea that there may be solutions for conditions within the microbiome, and could be probiotics. I think that kind of personalized medicine or personalized way to heal ourselves, that could be really interesting. And moving away, I love the idea of moving away from antibiotics. So, and that could be other ways, like research into other ways of restoring ourselves, our microbiome. So meditation and all of those kind of what we call alternative practices, but actually if we can start to position those as being more mainstream and which are work in harmony with a microbiome rather than against it, that's what I'd love to see.
Oh, that is amazing. And it's hopeful. We love the idea of the interconnectedness. And you've spoken to that on a micro and a really macro level, starting with our little tiny little microbes all the way to kind of saving the planet and humanity. So we love it. And we are really appreciative of your time talking about it. I know we've only scratched the surface, so we will link to your documentaries and any other resources that will help people go a little deeper into this. And we will be watching for the next documentary when it comes out. So we can't wait to learn more about it and spread the word. And we're really thankful for the information you've shared.
Yeah, thank you, Toni.
Well, thank you for having me on. And it's kind of scratching the surface, but if we all scratch the surface together, we can all change the world together.
And we'll get some more microbes.
Yeah, get dirty, lick things. That's the takeaway that I had.
Yeah, but it's kind of, I'm not suggesting you go on a tube train and just start licking the rails.
Okay, good.
Just
That's helpful. It seems
it's like just being mindful of your microbes and some, I don't know, embracing dirt a bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much.